Okay, before we go into live code, I want to show you this in context of our metaphor. This is video, gosh, what do we get on now? 9 in a series that I'm creating. So if some of this doesn't make sense, I highly advise that you go through videos 1 through 8. Or any piece of that to hopefully catch you up on what we are talking about. We are looking at Mr. Viewport. He is the owner of the box model construction company. And we're actually exploring some more of the box model today. I've touched on it a little bit through all of the other videos, but the next 2 videos are going to primarily focus on the box model. This was something that was super confusing to me. I didn't get what was happening, and once I understood, I realized that it really is a very integral part in understanding how elements move around in the viewport and on the invisible grid, if you will, of a website. So we talked about the parts on the pieces of the box model in the last video, so I'm not going to go too detailed in on that if you want to know more about what the sketch means. But for our video tonight, I am going to use, anytime I refer to the content, I'm going to use, this marking. Let's make it a little bit wider. Okay, this is going to be anytime we talk about the content. And remember, the content is defined by the tags that live in Mr. HTML Architect's briefcase. So this could be a P tag. Okay, anytime I talk about the padding for tonight, we are going to use this brush. I'm going to put a little bit of color in. Technically, Mr. HTML does not have any color, but we are going to put a smidge in just so you guys can see it a little bit better. Okay, so anytime I talk about padding, it's going to have more of this ethereal feel or a soft, fluffy, protective feel. Anytime I talk about the border, we are going to go to just a solid black line. Okay, and anytime I talk about the margin, we are going to use my magical aura or luminance bokeh lights. You didn't know that was my secret. That's how I really created those. Okay, we're going to use this. That way it makes sense, hopefully, to you guys what all this squiggly means. Remember, we have Betty Block and we have Ingrid Inline. If those don't make any sense to you, I did a whole video on the difference between Inline and Block display elements and CSS, so hopefully that helps a little bit. We are just going to work with Betty Block this evening because I think understanding the behavior of this one, at least for me, made a little bit more sense to start with, and then you can work. If you understand the box or the Block one, then understanding Inline is a little bit simpler. Okay. So let's go to our inking brush. Say I want to work, we're going to go back to the P because that's the one that makes the most sense to a lot of people. We've worked with it quite a bit. So we're going to use the P tag element. And I want to say something like, maybe I want to say too thick. The movie was awesome. This is my content that I want to actually render on Mr. Viewport. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to dotted line him because that's my symbol for any time I use content. And if you look back on all my videos, I've actually been alluding to that symbol for quite a while. Okay, I want you to remember that even though he squashed, okay, I drew that wrong because he's a block level, not an inline. Sorry, guys. That would be how you represent an inline element. Let's go back. Try this again. Okay, he is a block, or she is a block level element because she's Betty Block. So she is not just going to surround the text. She's going to go all the way across. That's where the content is. Okay, or space for the content, I guess would be a better way to explain that, because I could keep going because I have room to keep going. Okay, then I have padding. The padding is there, but you can't see it because I haven't set it. So it's a 0. But I'm still going to represent it. I'm going to make it super, super tiny, though, like the tiniest padding that you can possibly put on here, okay? It is so tiny. I didn't even change my color, did I? Not that it matters, because it's so tiny you can barely even see it. Oh my gosh, it's the tiniest padding, okay? This is my padding protecting the content. Not very well, because she's super squashed at the very top, okay? The border is also still there. Can't see it because it is set to 0. But it's there. And again, I'm going to keep it super, super tiny. I'm doing this on purpose because I didn't understand that these things still existed and they were able to be used. They're almost like Mr. Architect has tags in his briefcase, almost like power tools. And like say a drill can power on, it can turn, it can take screws out, but is it going to do that in Mr. HTML Architect's briefcase? No, that would be ridiculous. Why would you turn on a drill inside of a briefcase? You would have it would wreak havoc. So the potential of the tags is not really unleashed and used until it's placed into the viewport and styled differently or told to do something different. Otherwise, it's just going to stay an off drill and it's just sitting there, a lot like Betty Block is just chilling right now. Okay, same with the margin. The margin also exists. Can't see it. I'm walking through this slowly because hopefully once you get these concepts, you'll start picking up and be able to pick up on a lot of it on your own. Okay, so again, tiny, tiny, tiny magical. And it's so small, it's squishing. It's still got to be in that tiny little space, but it's there. You can barely even see it. It's just a tiny hint of light because it's invisible and probably set at 0 by default. I really don't know what they default set to. But for the purposes of my explanation, that seems to work. All right, so let's get rid of that. We just went through and we said, all right, we've got Betty Block, and I should have done this on a different layer. I'm going to do it on another layer the next time, that way. I don't have to erase my whole viewport. All right, so say I want to say the same thing. I don't remember. The movie was awesome. I think it's what I was just working with. And I don't want it to be squished in the very top left corner. That is so boring. But remember, that's our start position. Mr. Viewport says that all elements have to enter and start up at the top, which is why a lot of those were squished in there, just like they were, because that's the rules of the start position. It's kind of like starting at 0, 0. Okay. All right, but I want to say the movie was awesome, and I want to say it in a different spot on the page because the headline looks silly, kind of squished up there. So let's pretend that the headline actually goes here. The movie, or the paragraph, or the P tag, whatever you want to call it. The movie was awesome. It would probably make more sense to set this as an H1 because it's a header. Well, we're just going to roll with it for now. All right, so I have content, and it is I am now able to put more of an inline styling because I'm going to pretend that I have set this behavior to something. The display behavior has no longer a block behavior. I'm using the P tag, but it's not the block behavior. It's now the inline behavior. And I can do that by setting the display to either inline or inline block. So that I'm able to put my content box right around the content now because I changed the display. If that doesn't make sense, definitely watch my video before because that'll make a little more sense. But we're going to theoretically pretend the display default is set. All right, now I'm going to want some padding here because I like a little bit of white space. I like my content to have some room to breathe. So I'm going to change to my padding color. Okay, let's say I want to set, let's just say that's 1 unit-ish. Nope, I got to make it a little bigger because we are going to set it differently. Whoopsie daisy. I'm gonna go, well, maybe go, this is 1 unit of padding. And we're gonna gonna go 2. I think it might need 2 units of padding. Okay, so let's go 2 units of padding. Yeah, that looks about right. That seems like enough white space for me. Okay, here's the thing. You can see it here in this concept drawing. But when we get into live code, you won't be able to see the padding. I'll just have to talk to you about the soft padding that we colored teal in our particular example. It's invisible, which to me was very, very tough to think about the abstract, invisible things that were actually happening. But this padding is important. It has a job. It separates the border and the margin from the content. So it creates white space, which we know if you have any kind of artistic eye, you'll know that white space is really critical in creating cool looking visuals. So padding, if you lose it, then you'd have a lot of squashed items, all squashed up to the text, and it wouldn't look as good. Okay, so now we're going to add a border. I'm going to make this maybe, let's go like a 5 pixel border or 5 unit border maybe. Let's try that because the border is going to hold in. Let me pause there. I don't have to add a border. That's an option. Right now we have a border there, but you can't see it because it's set to 0. We also have margin set, but we can't see it because it's set to 0. Okay. In fact, I don't know if I want to do that yet. No, I'm gonna confuse you. We're gonna stick with this for now. Okay, so let's pretend. Oh, my iPad's going crazy here. We're gonna set a 5 pixel border. 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 unit. We don't really know what it's measured in. You can measure it in different things. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I've got a border. That's about 5 units. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, now I'm not going to spend my whole life coloring that in. I was trying to keep it all neat, and then I do that all the time when I'm creating stuff. And then I'm like, oh man, sorry, I got to go upside down, guys. 3, 4 to go straight. 4. Sideways. All right, so let's pretend this is solid. It doesn't have to be solid, but remember from my last video when I set it as solid, you can do dotted, you can do other things. You'd have to look in W3 schools to see the different properties because I don't remember them all, but this one is set to solid. It's set to 5 pixels, and it's currently set to black because we haven't really done any other styling, okay? All right, and then we still have a margin. We just can't really see it. It's invisible, and even when we do go to get it, it's still going to stay invisible, which mind-blowing concept to me, but it's actually what's happening on the page. So let's go here, and this doesn't really matter what size I set it to because I know that I have a margin on the right. Now let's start with the top. Top might be easier. Let's see that first. Okay, my top margin for this particular block level element. Go down a little bit here. There we go. This is my margin. This is my top margin. I don't know. Obviously, I'm guessing here because I don't have a real grid. I just have Mr. Viewport. I could do this on a real grid. Maybe if it's still confusing to you guys, write it in the comments and I'll explain it with a real grid. All right, so that is my top level margin. Let's assume, I don't know, maybe we want to go approximately 10 units or 10 pixels. I don't totally know. Okay, I'm gonna go down to a little bit different color gray here to show you the rest. Okay, so I also have a right margin, and there's a reason that I'm going in order too, because the top value is always set first, and then we have the right value margin. So I've got right margin set at I'd say that's maybe about 4 or 5 units. Let's go about 5. I don't really know. In hindsight, it probably would have been smarter to put this on grid. Okay, but then, all right, so that's a right margin. We have a top of 10. We have a right of 5. Okay, and let's change our gray color. Still try to stay somewhat in the gray area, because remember, you're not really actually seeing this render on the viewport, but that doesn't mean that it's not controlling the movement of the element. Okay, and then we're gonna do bottom, because the bottom, on my bottom border, I'm not gonna do much with it. I'm just gonna go about two units maybe. Okay, so let's say that's 2 units. That's my bottom margin. And one more gray color. Let's go kind of lightish, greenish. And this one is going to be set at, oops, why do I keep doing that? This is silk. We have top, we have right, we have bottom, we have left. I always have to think about that. Ooh, that's really light, but you'll get it. Okay, so my left border then is, or I'm sorry, margin. Don't want to confuse you. Oops, he's kind of hanging out. I really technically shouldn't be going all the way over to that border, so I might have to fix that a little bit in my drawing. Okay, so set that. It's a little bit bigger than the 5, so let's say 7, maybe about 7 units over here for the left. Okay, a few things I want to clean up. Welcome to my mind. This is how I think. Okay, so I'm going to clean this border up a little bit, because the margin is not going to necessarily overlap with that border, and I got a little messy there. So I just want you to make sure that you note that the border is going to be a little bit different. Okay, so what we have here is a different way to explain the box model, that everything still exists even if you couldn't see it, but I did manipulate it this time. So I have content set to inline, that's display inline, which means that the content box is going to go right around the actual text. You're not going to have much space. And then I have a padding that is protecting the content. This will be invisible. You will not see it render on the page when I actually go in to show you what this looks like in live code. And then we have a border set at approximately 5 pixels. I don't think I wrote that down. We're gonna need that. I'm gonna need these notes so that when I show you in live code, nope, we're going units because we don't really know yet. Okay, just pretend they're units of whatever measurement you decide to use. Okay, and then we have margin. This completely blew my mind again, but the margin is set, but you won't see that either. It's all going to be invisible space in the viewport. But the margin, actually, it looks like almost like like a bunch of mad people who have like pushed and pulled at the content, and it says, hey, you need to go over here to the right 5, and I need you to go left 7, and I need you to go down from the top 10. And it's almost like the margin is kind of bossing and pushing that particular box around the page. I can almost visually see it. I wish I could animate this a little better in Procreate, but I'm not real good at that yet. But all right, we are going to pause this particular video because I want to go into live code and I need to switch a few things around, but stay tuned and we'll watch this very same scenario that we just talked about, but we're going to live code it instead.